So, if you're video casting this, it's something we could post, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and,
I can post it on the discussion.
What?
I'll post it on the discussion board on the
Okay.
canvas.
What? You put me in YouTube?
Yeah.
Nothing like bad, right? Nothing like inappropriate stories or Yeah, okay. All right. They didn't want to know that. Okay, guys. So I'm going to start the review. Okay. Try to get as much as I can, so it's relatively fast. That's probably actually good. It is good to have a video cast potentially. So we're going to start it now. If you just kind of look at this for a second, because I'm not going to start on this. The big things that are on this test from the respiratory, which if we have time, or you hang in there, sort of was this hypoxia and this sort of matching this ventilation diffusion rates. That was sort of chapter 17. And then the big thing was hemoglobin saturation curves, right? The normal and all that. And that was that. Okay, and that's most of the respiratory that's on. But I don't want to start on that. I want to start on the kidney, because that's the bulk of it and the hardest material. And so I've already drawn this here. So what I wanted to start on and try to review is not all this, okay? Because again, we ended up getting a lot more detail than all this. I mean, again, there are a million nephrons, okay? Just kind of get through. So, and again, this is something good. We have the names. So the big first thing then, as far as review material, is filtration. And so, if you remember, filtration was basically based upon size and charge. That you look at glomerulus, Bowman's capsule, okay, that barrier there, there's sort of large spaces in between on both, so that size, it's negatively charged in the middle, in the extracellular matrix. Bottom line is, what this is excluding basically, by size and charge, are cells and proteins. Okay? Basically, again, when we talk about what gets in, it's pretty much everything else. So water gets in, the salts, urea, things like glucose, amino acids, could freely filter in. And we'll come back to the proximal tubule in a minute. So size and charge. Now the other details of this though, again showing pictures of this, and we'll put that in, is looking at the control of this. So, since water and all that can fully filter in, as it passes through, we do not want 100% to go in. Blood pressure drops. And so we are controlling at any given time how much is circulating through the kidneys, and that's your glomerular filtration rate. And you can see, when you look at the daily GFR, it's 180 liters a day, reminding us that means 60 times a day this entire blood supply is going through. But the real detail to remind us of are this slide and then coming up here. It's because you have to know this, right? So the forces controlling GFR are, where's my red one, is the major force that's pushing all that material through is basically, this is force, is the pressure within the afferent arteriole. Okay, so it's basically, hydrostatic pressure, as it says up there. Hydrostatic. Which is, again, that's the blood pressure that's basically actually at the glomerulus, okay? So it's sort of that's going to be the pressure that's going to push things through, not necessarily systemic blood pressure. We're going to show you again, we're going to control that so that this is at a given amount. You're not memorizing 55, but you do know that is the major force. So hydrostatic pressure, which is that pressure is pushing it in, okay, that's that direction, but you have two opposing forces. Put it here. So you have the fluid pressure, simply the fluid that are in the nephrons, that's obviously a pressure, that's opposing it. And then, put it all over there, the idea is that proteins are in the blood but not in the kidney. Water goes to where there's more salt, protein, sugar. It's colon osmotic pressure. Which is exactly, kind of what we were looking at, especially this and this, where we looked at keeping the blood in the vessels versus going to the tissues. It's very much like it, including if we have liver failure. Well, we can talk about GFR, and have to repeat it for us. But again, you've got to remember those three pressures. Hydrostatic pressure is pushing it in, fluid pressure and colon osmotic pressure is opposing it. Normally, of course, there is going to be net flow in, and that's going to be your GFR. All right, check. The other major thing before we go back or really go forward is we had two local controls of GFR that we had to know. And this is sort of the point, right? The idea is, the idea of systemic blood pressure can vary, but we don't want that to cause the GFR to vary that much as long as we can. We want to control it and keep it constant. So there's systemic controls, we talked about some of those, but it's really just local control that I want. And in fact, I'm just really looking sort of at this afferent arterial. There's stuff going on here, but we're not talking about it. So first one, myogenic regulation. This is the exact same as autoregulation because it's simply the smooth muscle cells working. As blood pressure increases into the afferent, the afferent arteriole, it's going to cause vasoconstriction. Again, to control GFR, the filtration rate in. Okay, so as pressure is increasing, it's, they sort of make it, it's going to control it. The idea is if you have higher blood pressure, it constricts so that we keep this pressure and GFR constant. Okay, and it's just the exact same thing. So myogenic regulation, just like autoregulation. The harder one was this. And so the whole point of this, the best picture really to show actually is this idea of the macula densa. So you have to know, here is the ascending limb. I think you all know these parts. So in the ascending limb, are cells, specialized cells called the macula densa, which can detect flow of salts, etc., going past this. All right. Now, if we're over here, it couldn't do much good. But the idea of this is, when you look at this, this is why that other picture, nephrons look so complicated. Here is Bowman's castle, proximal tubule, descending. The ascending limb, including the macula densa, is literally, if you look at this, passing right in between, right next to the afferent arteriole. So it kind of is nice here when it looks at it. If GFR is increasing, so if we have higher flow, it detects it. It's literally now going to send messages via the granular cells to the afferent arteriole to cause it to constrict, decrease the pressure, decrease GFR. Okay? So again, you're not going to have what's the 7 steps or whatever this is, but you want to understand the second response. You got to remember these macula densa cells are part of the ascending limb, but the idea is as GFR increases, you're going to have these detected, send signals via the granular cells to the afferent arteriole to cause constriction control. That's your second local control. Any questions? Those are the major things, okay, from this particular chapter, and it shows all that. Then we come now to the big stuff. Okay, so let's get out in case I want to show some pictures. Let's go 18, no, 19, no, I need 20. No, 19. No, 20. PowerPoints. There's no kidney stones on test next week. They're on test today. All right, well, keep this up for a second. But here I'm going to be a little more just using my board here. So, yeah, we know all the parts here, and we talked about filtration. So now we're talking about kind of what's happening in each segment. And again, we're going to concentrate and I'll show this on the long loops of Henley. When we get to these segments. So right now, we're just looking at this, and the idea is really, again, what's happening in the proximal tubule. The big words are bulk reabsorption. So remember these paratubular capillaries all the way around. So the bottom line for this, besides that, is simply basically most of the water and salts will be reabsorbed in this first segment. Remember, it's convoluted, there's a lot of surface area to do that. And using these transporters, if everything is good, all of the glucose, all the nutrients, all the glucose and amino acids should be reabsorbed right away in that first segment, in the proximal tubule. The only reason we've already talked about this for even in the lab part, the idea is why you might have glucose in the urine is simply if you have high blood glucose, okay, for like diabetes, these transporters get saturated, hey, they're working, but it can't get it all. Glucose is going to remain in the filtrate and come out basically in the urine. And where glucose goes, who's coming along? Water. And that's that osmotic diuresis. That's why for diabetics, you also are dehydrated and lose a lot of water. It's really the sugar drawing the water out. Again, you kind of get this idea. Wherever sugar, we just did proteins, salts are going, that's where water is going. In fact, that's how we get water back. Okay, we basically pump the salts back and water follows. But that's all. It's really just remembering this, right? That's what happens in the proximal tubule. So the bulk of things go then, we'll kind of go over all this isn't going too fast for that. Going too fast to do this thing. So really, again, we're going to talk about controlling the concentration of urine. And so, the idea is when you're actually looking at these million nephrons, most of them are just cortical ones, so the loop doesn't extend. But to make this concentrated urine, we're looking at the ones with these long loops of Henle. Okay, about 20%. I'm not going to ask that number. That's what it is. And here's the picture I kind of want to go back to that. So these long loops, when you look at the other nephrons, they're going a little bit. The long loops extend deep into the kidney, the medulla, right? And these are the ones, obviously, you can tell by the numbers now, that are really going to be controlling the concentration of urine. So we're going to go through that again. And the first thing to do is sort of, I can put this here too, remembering, this kind of goes even today, right? That the isotonic is about 300 milliosmolar, and at the end of the proximal tubule, it's basically stayed because we're doing salts and water isotonic. But now we're going to go through this, and again, we have this idea. Where is my guy? Yeah, there's Stu Mass's statement up there. So we're going to go through these segments, and again, by now I think we know the long loops of Henle are going to create this vertical salt gradient that the collecting duct will use to make more or less concentrated urine. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to talk about what happens in each segment to do this. And so I'm going to put it again, the descending limb. We're going to reabsorb water. H2O, H2O. Remember, we got blood vessels to pick this up too, but we're reabsorbing water out of this. The salts are staying, and so therefore the filtrate, which is what we're calling fluid at this point, the filtrate becomes concentrated. So just putting some numbers in then, if you're losing this, again, the idea is on these long loops, at the bottom of the loop of Henle is at 1200 milliosmolar. So that's what's happening. We're reabsorbing water, concentrating the salt. That's the descending level. on the, here, I'm gonna put 2A and 2B right now. So when we talk about 2A and B, we're gonna talk about both of these being very similar. So in the ascending limb, and I kind of put this too, ascending limb and distal tubule, those are very common. The idea is we're going to pump out salts. Okay, again, ions, right? Sodium, potassium, etc. We're pumping those out. And so we're going to, we're going to pump, but we're going to reabsorb salts. Okay, just that you need energy to do it. And again, normally where salt goes, water wants to go, never. Okay? So in these segments, H2O cannot follow. There are no water pores, no aquaporins. Okay? So again, how to do that? There's no aquaporins here, water can't follow. Okay? So two things we're going to put on this then. So the idea now is, I've put it in red, if you're pumping out salt and water staying in, this now is becoming more dilute. So that at the end of the distal tubule, that's why, unless the new version I look at says this is important. At the top of the collecting duct, it's basically a very dilute filtrate all the way down to 50. So we have no aquaporins, the filtrate dilutes. But again, by a mechanism that we're not going to talk about, okay, that you can, I think I have a video clip that could do it, because the idea is, okay, well, how are we forming a vertical osmotic gradient by just pumping out salts? And it's a very complicated process, okay, that I'm not going to go into. I don't even completely understand, take a while to look at it. Bottom line is, it's going to create this vertical salt gradient. So you're pumping out salt, but it ends up forming that gradient like we saw in that kidney figure, 100, in which it's a vertical salt gradient. So the, again, that's why I like that picture. So you actually see all those nephrons and sort of the inside here, 1200, 900, etc. So again, the long loops penalty created the gradient. But we have to do the vasa recta, and then we'll come to the punchline. So the vasa recta, a complicated picture. The idea is once we have that gradient, we don't want to mess with it because we're going to be filtering 180 liters a day. We don't want water to come here and salts to come here. We need something now to pick up that salt and then pick up the water. That's why it's the vasa recta. The vasa recta maintains the gradient. Doesn't create, it maintains the gradient. And basically, you can look at this, I have the arrow going, you see it's running opposite direction. Bottom line is, by going this way, it's picking up that excess salt that's being pumped out, it's picking it up as it comes down, okay, because that's where all the salt's being pumped out. So now as it basically is going back to the body, we have all the salt, which is basically an osmotic pressure, osmotic magnet. So instead of the water basically going there, it's going to be sucked up by the vasa recta. And you can actually see then, we're going back to the body, isotonic, which is what we want. And so we're reabsorbing the salt and water. It has to run countercurrent. That's basically it, okay? So it's running countercurrent, it's picking up salt on the way down, water on the way up to maintain the gradient. So we go to the punchline now, the collecting duct. Again, the idea of water reabsorption. Water always can be reabsorbed, proximal tubule, always descending limb. Never hormonal control. So we're looking at water reabsorption on the collecting duct controlled by ADH, which is of course, and again, but I won't use it on the test. I hope I will again. I'll look. You know, the book, you know, it's also called vasopressin, so a lot of the figures will have that instead of ADH. But they're the same thing, so antidiuretic hormone. And again, the whole idea, and I could show that picture, although I don't want to too much. Yeah, just to kind of show without looking at all 1, 2, 3, 4. The idea of the cells of the collecting duct that are going down, they have aquaporins, but they basically are not functional, they're not inserted. What the ADH is going to do, vasopressin, right? They're going to basically bind to those cells and through intracellular process, insert those. And so now water can be reabsorbed. So those guys don't have aquaporins active until ADH hits it. Now the reason we have the gradient and the reason we can control this is there's a different sensitivity to those cells to ADH. The ones at the top are the most sensitive. So we have this idea. If we need a little, remember this means again, I'll write H2O reabsorption again. So again, if you need some water back, you produce a certain level of ADH. These cells are sensitive enough to respond, insert those aquaporins, water gets reabsorbed. Remember, we have vessels that take it out. Water gets reabsorbed, and so the filtrate will equilibrate to wherever that is and become more concentrated. Okay, you need more water, that's more ADH, more aquaporins, filtrate, which way, I mean, the urine will end up being more concentrated finally. The biggest thing we can do, the most we can concentrate our urine with our maximum sort of amount of ADH is our gradient. And so basically you've inserted aquaporins all the way, you equilibrate, you're at the most concentrated. So more ADH, more water reabsorption, more concentrated the urine. You need this a little bit for today too, so it's not bad to actually do this. Any questions about that? Okay, again, luckily, the recording is really nice actually, because I'm doing this fast and you're concentrating. I want you to be able to watch this because you don't get to see me during the week. So the next big thing, and we're going to do it that way, is besides ADH, we looked at aldosterone. Or ALD. And again, those cells, which we played the game with too, those principal cells are located at the top of the collecting duct, you know, and they're interspersed with those interplanes, by the way. But the bottom line from the beginning of this game was when those are activated, they're going to, again, increase reabsorption of sodium. And, you know, we're talking about microcontrol then of salt and water back to the body. And of course, later we'll play the game with potassium. So the reason we do that is because right now, we want to remember these 4 conditions and how these hormones react. Again, it should make some sense by just knowing salt or water and salt reabsorption. Low blood pressure, high blood pressure, low blood osmolarity, high osmolarity. Remember, I'm leaving the space because I'm going to add renin and stuff in here. Right now, again, we're just putting ADH, aldosterone, ADH, aldosterone, ADH, aldosterone. So that's just remembering which way they're going to go, and we'll do the mechanism. So again, low blood pressure, ADH, and ALD are going to go which direction? Because we need water and salt. Because water will follow. Both of those go up. Try to again correct this. We're going to go back to that. For high blood pressure, therefore, they go down because we want to get rid of the salt and water. All right? They're usually working together. These conditions, and again, I like to do this because what does low osmolarity or high osmolarity mean to me? Low means there's less outside, or means there's high outside. Hypo versus hypertonic. And so really, again, I like this because then all you have to think about is what do you want to add to this outside the cells? Do you want to add water or salt? So what do you want? In this case, you want to add salt. So ALD goes, ADH goes down. Okay, and I know again, some water will follow that salt, but right now we're gonna get that much closer to 300 before we have to worry about anything changing. So they're working in opposition, we definitely don't want more water. If you wanted to loop that out, the opposite, right? You want water in there, you don't want to add more salt. So they're in opposition. The complication we added was, already got the perfect drink. We know, well, we'll talk about that in a second. So we look at this, and remember, sometimes I've had, and I have extra stuff here. We'll put this up here. I've had people have questions, and short answer ones where, I actually had you sort of memorize everything about this, and you do have to memorize it basically. But let me go through and kind of put it here. So again, the idea of low blood pressure again is this could cause death. So we want something to happen very rapidly, to do this. So in order to really control and sort of accelerate the release of ADH and aldosterone, we have this system here, as you can see, renin-angiotensin aldosterone. So the liver again is producing a zymogen. We know this semi-course by now. This is inactive. It's circulating, ready to go. The trigger, low blood pressure, is going to be detected by the kidney, and it's going to produce renin. Okay? So under low blood pressure right now, I'm just going to put a simplified version. You're going to have an increase of, have a room here. You're going to have an increase in renin. Now, it becomes Ang1. Ang1 isn't fully active, but here's going to be the key. And this is important, right? The idea is the blood cells, blood endothelial cells, are producing something called angiotensin converting enzyme ACE, okay? And that converts Ang1 to Ang2. So you always got this, and you always got that. Renin's the key to get us to Ang2, okay? And that's the idea of ACE. And the reason I want us to know that, of course, because, and I've mentioned this before, there are ACE inhibitors. And again, if you have an ACE inhibitor, instead of raising blood pressure, it's going to lower blood pressure. And so it's another blood pressure medication to block this production. And of course, if you have low blood pressure, you're going to have hypohyperkalemia, metabolic acidosis. Well, that's part of the game, right? But the idea is we do this. So right now, just for this part, we have high renin. We can write high Ang2. And if we're not concentrating on how it affects the cardio response, which it does, but the idea is basically this. It goes through the neural cortex, causes production of aldosterone. It goes to the hypothalamus, it causes production of vasopressin or ADH. So it's sort of controlling what we have here. So in a low blood pressure, you're going to have high renin, angiotensin 2, ADH, aldosterone. Only one we need for this is, even though I have this figure here, is simply, how are we going to get this to happen very quickly? It's going to be this figure here. So the idea is you have a lot of blood, your high blood pressure, a lot of volume, stretches your atrial cells, it releases ANP, which basically, you're not doing this whole thing, right? You're looking just at this and this, it does the arrow down. So high blood pressure triggers an increase, ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide, that in turn goes to these places and causes those to decrease. So we're not doing anything over there. Question? Okay. Again, yeah, that's a good figure, isn't it? And that's the complicated version of my little boxes there. All right, so pH. Well, really, then pH means the game. We have this figure because some pH is controlled in the proximal tubule, and I looked at that and I'm like, I don't care about that. So we're not dealing with the pH control of that. We are to the game. It's really, I can put that. Well, I guess we have to do this first on the game. So I'm going to get rid of this. I don't need the kidney anymore here. Okay, so basically, I'm going to pH control in the game. And then I'm going to take another break, and so maybe that's enough for you guys, maybe not. Then I'll go back and actually talk about respiratory. So I'm kind of doing the whole review as much as I can, as much as you can take. So here's our famous sort of equation. And again, you can, if you want to memorize this like this, that's fine. But I think it's crazy to do it. And so we're looking at potentially how to diagnose by looking at basically pH, CO2, and bicarbonate, how to diagnose whether you have one of those four conditions. And again, we'll put these because we're going to obviously use this a bit for the game. So again, respiratory acidosis, respiratory, but RSP, alkalosis, metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis. And again, just for a second, just to put the names down here. Okay, respiratory acidosis. Remember, you hold your breath, and we'll go ahead and put these though. CO2 is staying in, so that's just to kind of remind us we're in a way of this. Hypoventilation. Again, if the respiratory causes it, it's respiratory. Hyperventilation. The two main examples. Or anything, again, you're not getting enough ventilation, or you basically are getting rid of too much. Metabolic, if respiratory isn't causing it, if something else causes, it's metabolic. Metabolic acidosis, an example was production of ketones, so for diabetics. Ketoacidosis. Alkalosis, an example was vomiting. But of course, we know now, just by kidney reacting to something and counter-reacting, we can actually cause this as well. Our kidney's not working. Okay, those are examples. But the key is how to get, knowing from this pattern what to do. Now, for the respiratory, it works like we did at the beginning with the law of mass action. Okay, so again, let me just CO2 H plus HCO3 minus, because that's really what we're concentrating on, right? So if you hypoventilate, hold your breath, CO2 goes which direction? It goes up. And remember, or you can remember your way, as CO2 goes up, it's pushing it to that side. And so what are the H plus and HCO3 doing? Did I do something wrong here? Okay, so you hypoventilated. I'm doing this right? You hypoventilated. Yeah, pH goes down. Acidosis. So it follows law of mass action. We just didn't talk about this before. Okay, R is up, up, up. And so that's respiratory acidosis. Okay, respiratory alkalosis basically is going to be, right again, CO2 plus CO3 down. You lost CO2, all these go down to replace it. So you can remember up, up, down, 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 or remember by the law of mass action, pretty easy. Now the metabolic is going to be the one you wouldn't expect by just the law of mass action. So metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis, CO2, H plus, HCO3 minus, And I'm gonna write those two tricks again, but again, if you know, just to kind of go through this in a second, if we had metabolic acidosis, okay, remember H plus would be going up, okay, law of mass action would shift it this way, okay. Again, that means, you know, if you're shifting this way, bicarbonate is going down, we talked about it before, and CO2 therefore is going up. But, and it says it there, you're not going to measure that in a patient, because the idea is your respiratory system is going to respond to that just so fast, it's going to sort of overcompensate, or at least max it, so CO2 will actually be lower, because you'll breathe it out so quickly. And so you're not going to have that. You're going to have this match, it's going to be low. So instead of doing the law of mass action thing, again, basically two ways the tricks are in this, that you're always, that we do it this way, that this will always be, your bicarbonate is always from, this is metabolic, remember, metabolic. These, you're going to have these in opposite direction, and because of this overcompensation, you're going to have CO2 is always going to be the same as the bicarb. So really, you have a pattern like that, R CO3 minus CO2. Or you're going to have a pattern of, you know, an alkalosis, but that means this is high, CO2 is high. These always match, and these are always in opposition. And it's just because of that overcompensation. So you look at metabolic, again, you don't even have to go too much of this, right? If you have metabolic acidosis, well, what does that mean? What is H plus? Therefore, pretty easy that way. Give my heart that chart. Alkalosis, this is down, therefore this is, and that is up. Okay? I had to do that because I can't handle that. So that will work. Those other questions are going to be, either I'm going to have, you know, you vomited, what's the pattern, or I'll put the pattern, you got to name the condition. That's all multiple choice. Okay, hang in there, knowing that's on videotape, because again, I want to get it on as much as I can here. The last thing, and then we are going to take a break, the last major thing on the kidney that I want to go over, keep that up, is the gain. So when you look at the extra questions, you'll see, and it's all multiple choice, you're going to see you're not going to draw out this thing, okay? But I'm going to be leading you with the questions, which again is the idea, if you get the first one right, and sort of get it, you'll get them all. But if you make that mistake on the very first one, because it tests dyslexia, which everyone has because you do it, if you make that wrong and you kind of get the game, you're going to have that wrong, that wrong, that wrong, and you're going to lose like 6, 8 points, whatever it is. So you've got to practice again before next Friday, over and over. Okay, like just practice and make sure you're right. Practice and make sure you're right. When you get in here, put it down there so you won't try to make that dyslexia in your mind. Okay, because that will really suck. Okay, so we have that. We don't need this anymore. Let's see if we've got the game, and we'll play a couple of times. Okay. So you have type A intercalated, type B intercalated, and you have the principal cells, which again respond to ADH. And really, again, I'm not even going to write the whole thing in this, right? These are in the intercalated cells. All you have to remember is which way the H plus is going to go, and potassium goes the opposite way. So this is responding. The way I start is this responds to if your blood, let's just make sure, you do want to get oriented. Here's reabsorption of the blood, and this represents getting out, excretion. All right, so type A, you're responding to acidosis. So are you going to reabsorb that acid or get rid of it? So, okay. So if you know that, what happens there? Okay, right? As long as you remember A, acidosis, you know you get rid of it. Basically you already know your spiny alkalosis H is going to go back and reabsorb. So if we want to know where potassium goes on that one, where's it going? Opposite direction. Okay, it follows bicarbonate. We're not even talking about bicarbonate right now. So you're getting rid of the acid, you're reabsorbing potassium. You're putting the acid back in, you obviously are excreting the potassium. That's all you really have to know about those cells. For the principal cells, we know in the response to aldosterone, we reabsorb sodium, okay, and water, which affects blood pressure. But of course, that means what happens to potassium? Okay, that's it. Those are the boxes you need. Look how simple those are, relatively, okay? That's all you need to play the game. And so the game, again, is going to involve these 4 aspects. So there's sort of 8 basic scenarios. You're going to have blood pressure, low or high. You're going to have potassium levels, potentially low or high. You're going to have pH levels, low or high. And you're going to have respiration, low and high. Okay? So 8 kind of scenarios here. And so all you have to basically start to follow is how one's affecting the other, affecting the other, affecting the other. You don't have to memorize in some weird fashion. So again, if we just do a couple examples. Low blood pressure and hypoventilation. Okay, 2 of the 8 examples. And so we're going to see if we, again, you're going to see I'm going to guide you. Let me put it on and you'll see, but it's multiple choice. But if you have low blood pressure, remember we're not dealing with anything else but sort of what we have on the board here. Which cell is going to respond and what's going to happen? So what cell is going to respond to low blood pressure? Principal. And is aldosterone going up or down? Okay, we want aldosterone to go up because we want actually this to happen like we've been playing before. Sodium is going to be reabsorbed in water to correct that problem. But at the same time, what is happening? Loss of potassium. So I'll go ahead and kind of put it. You excrete potassium. So now you potentially hypokalemia. Okay. Now where do you go? Is there another cell type in our kidney that can try to respond to hypokalemia? Okay. See how easy this is then? You're like, okay, I got to put it back. It's type A. So type A are going to be activated. Okay, to reabsorb that potassium. Okay, but now you look at the other side. Okay, it's getting rid of. So basically, what does this cause if you get rid of too much acid? Metabolic alkalosis. Okay, so you reabsorb potassium, but again, you excrete H+. So now potentially metabolic alkalosis. Okay, we have another system, even on the side, we have another system we haven't talked about that's going to respond to metabolic alkalosis. And what's respiration going to do? Decrease respiration. Okay? Now, again, if I had more, time or to do something, I actually would want you to potentially do some of these linearly like this so that you actually get that flow of how to do it. And that's fine to probably do anyway. But on the multiple choice, I'll be sort of, guiding it, right? You have, low blood pressure, or you have an adverse reaction to some, hypertension drug, okay, that causes you to have low blood pressure. You take it, what might be the symptoms? But either way, the idea is that. And I'm going to go, aldosterone goes up and reabsorbs potassium. I'm going to have those 4 choices, but it's going to be this one. Aldosterone goes up and that, okay? And basically hypokalemia. So I have, the elements of hypokalemia. But the idea is you'll know you're going to that first. And then in response to question 18, type A will be activated, type B will be activated. I'll have those choices. It's going to be this. And then, in response to that, respiration goes up or down. I can't even give a stupid C or D, like, respiration doesn't change or you just die because then no one's been victim. So you really have respiration up or down. But you see, if you switch this and kind of get it, you kind of get all of them wrong.
You have ADH difference here.
Okay, if we did hypoventilation, okay? So because again, it's gonna be guided a little bit, but for hypoventilation, well, first of all, what does that cause? What do we call that condition caused by? So we have respiratory acidosis. So again, which way are you going? So what's gonna happen first for respiratory acidosis? Who's next? Type A? Type A are activated. They're going to, of course, get rid of the acid, but of course, what other condition can be caused by that? Hyperkalemia. And we have, remember, you're only using one of these, or so I'm not giving you another choice. But the idea is, what's next? So if you had the intercalated, it's called hyperkalemia. Who's going to respond next to try to correct it? Okay, and too bad it went the same way, but the idea is aldosterone going up or down? Up, right? It's still going up here, right? The idea is you have hyperkalemia, you want to get rid of the potassium, right? And this is how things work with aldosterone. So you are going to increase aldosterone, okay? And that is going to get rid of, excrete the potassium to care of that, but it's going to reabsorb sodium and H2O, potentially resulting in increase in blood pressure. And then, of course, we're stopping. See, we have it. And again, I'm going to have it boom, boom, boom. Okay, so it's going to be linear that way. And there's 8 types of things that are going to be on there. Okay, I mean, not all of them are going to be on, but it's potential. Everybody get that game, and see how it's going to be played on the test. It's on the extra questions too. That's the major stuff, the kidding. So it's 11:07. Take a break or leave. Okay, if you had enough. But I'm going to go back and review the major things in the respiratory when we're back.